Was good with y'all? It's your boy AD, and to be honest, TemTem is a surprisingly well-made MMO that resembles Pokemon a lot, but has many unique features of its own to make it a respectable future competitor. Now, for those that don't know what TemTem is, it's a massively multiplayer online role-playing game developed by Spanish development studio Crema. And massively multiplayer online is why most gamers just shorten it up to MMO, because nobody's trying to say that every time they're trying to refer to those type of games. So that's why we shorten it up to just MMO. And this game is published by Humble Bundle. That would be a hard name to try to say 3 times fast. But anyways, the game was released in early access through Steam on January 21st, 2020. So it's not officially out. Right now it's in early access only for PC players. But there are future plans for release on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch. So that's good to hear that they're making console versions to eventually come out in the future. Which is kind of a backwards way to do it if you're asking me. But since it's a Kickstarter, it may have had some deal already in place for whoever contributed to the making of this game. Probably had certain ways they wanted it to put out, because whenever you invest in something, you usually have a say-so in how it's rolled out into the public. And lastly, this game runs off the Unity engine, but I feel like this is a serious rival to Pokemon because fans been wanting a massively multiplayer online mode for the longest in the Pokemon gaming universe. And although Pokemon Sword and Shield did have an online mode, it was very restrictive because they didn't want their children audience to be exposed to negative things, such as adults using profanity. With Nintendo is a family-friendly service, like I say all the time in my videos. So for them, they try to protect them as much as possible. So that's why the online mode was so restrictive. But for TemTem, it is strictly an MMO service. So that means that it's more freedom given in the game, which is why this game is getting so much attention from the gaming community. But before we get more into TemTem, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, while also sharing this to help my channel grow. Now, starting with gameplay, this game, like I'm gonna be saying throughout this video, is heavily inspired by Pokemon. Hopefully Game Freak doesn't become jealous and sue Spanish development because of likeness, but you never know, because when Fortnite first came out, PUBG let them coincide, but after that they tried to sue them because they saw the type of success Fortnite was getting was 10 times more than they was receiving, because they felt like they had the Battle Royale format popularized first and Fortnite just copied off of that. But Fortnite eventually overcame their lawsuit because the building mechanic really sets it apart from PUBG, and just the way it's optimized. But this isn't about PUBG and Fortnite. I just brought that up to show that companies like Pokemon are not above trying to sue TemTem. And another similarity with Fortnite and TemTem is that TemTem is an early access game, but what separates it from the pack is that it had a low budget at the start, because it started as a Kickstarter indie title and eventually received more sponsors so they could finally put out this graphically inclined game. And they're really doing more with less in comparison to Game Freak with Pokemon, because they made a lot of money with the past Pokemon games, but their budget consists of hundreds of millions of dollars. So with TemTem, when they say less is more, that's exactly how TemTem came about, because they started with less but ended up with more because they really put time into the way they developed this game. And speaking of development, the style of fights that they chose to go with is 2-on-2, which adds to the strategy of the game, because instead of one TemTem being rock, paper, scissors, because certain TemTems are weaker / stronger than other TemTems, so instead of it being rock, paper, scissors, it adds an extra layer to the combat, so it's not just so straightforward. And one of the key features that makes the difficulty stand out is the stamina bar. So you could do a move, if that move takes up a lot of the stamina bar, if you do that twice and your TemTem doesn't have any more stamina throughout the rest of the fight, if you keep using that move, you'll damage your TemTem, and eventually it won't be able to fight anymore, because when the stamina runs out, it goes out. So that's a surprising feature that I saw added into the game, because instead of just focusing on what type of attacks do what amount of damage to certain TemTems, you also have to manage the stamina so they don't run out and end up dying out on you in the middle of the fight. But moving on to story, this is an early development, but they still have a full story campaign. And I heard that people who played the game, it's around 20 plus hours of gameplay, and that's a lot compared to just the main campaign in the early access game. Like, that's not including any of the side missions or battles. The main campaign is over 20 plus hours. And throughout the campaign, you compete against 8 dojo leaders and evil TemTem tamers. The battles are similar to Pokemon, as you use special memory cards instead of Pokeballs to catch them. So that's one of the many similarities to Pokemon. Like I said before, the TemTems are weaker / stronger than other TemTem. So the way you go throughout the campaign is just managing that balance of having a certain number of each type of TemTem, because you don't want just all one type of TemTem, because then if you run into another trainer that has the weakness for your TemTem, then you can't change up your lineup because they're all the same type. So that's why you have to keep that in mind to keep the variety as you grow throughout the game. Moving on to the online mode, TemTem uses an icon-based communication system, and the MMO style gameplay has you running into other players frequently throughout the campaign, playing and trading while also teaming up a dedicated co-op. And just listening and reading the feedback from the people who play the game and also complainers of Pokemon, they say that this is the biggest way that TemTem can overcome Pokemon, is the MMO being so expansive and not as restrictive as the online mode for Pokemon Sword and Shield. So it's nice to see that TemTem actually gave the fans what they wanted and gave them a whole MMO type playground to play with their brand. And competition can only make Pokemon better, as I'm sure right now they're probably developing MMO specific Pokemon game as we speak. As TemTem's still in early access, and when it comes to consoles, Pokemon may already have that ready for them. But at the same time, Pokemon is a Nintendo exclusive, and if TemTem goes to all platforms like they're saying they would, it's kind of like, not to bring up Fortnite again, but it's kind of like the similarity to where PUBG was only on Xbox. Fortnite, when it came out, you could play it on Xbox or PS4, so it really just helped boost the sales. So I'm thinking TemTem will most likely go in that route. Getting into the pros and cons of this game, starting with cons. The story isn't the best, but it's good enough to keep you interested, as it is a beta, so don't expect too much, but they give you more than enough to handle for just an early access slice of the game. The online mode is good, but needs to be improved in the final product, which goes for any type of mode for early releases. They're early release for a reason, and that means that whenever the full game comes out, things are going to be improved, and the online mode needs to be on the top of that list. And of course, I put this as a con, but it's not really, as it's in beta, so it's to be assumed, but bugs, glitches in many areas are missing, but we assume that they will be added when the game officially comes out. So be on the lookout for future updates on when this game officially comes out. And in my opinion, I don't know if it's going to be anytime soon because of the early access getting such high reviews. They can really take their time with the final release and not rush it. Or if they do the opposite and release it just to capitalize off the excitement, then it may backfire, as obviously since it being in early access, they're not finished with the game. So they got to take some time to actually finish it, and hopefully they do that instead of trying to rush it out. But ending with pros on the game, the tactics are less straightforward and really makes winning each battle feel more rewarding. From watching the game and listening to players put a lot of hours into it, it's harder than you think. Like, you play a Pokemon type game, it's kind of simple and you kind of figure out the ins and outs of the game. But with TemTem, it's the same thing, except they added certain mechanics into the battles, like the stamina bar, that adds to how hard it is to get through each battle. I was hearing that players kept being defeated in their first gym battle. So this game doesn't hold your hand at all, even though its appearance seems like it's going to be a simple, straightforward game. It's really more complex and takes a lot more thought than you realize. And then finally, there's more personalization options and equally customizable home options, meaning you can customize your character's clothes and appearance, and also you can customize the home that you live in, which is nice to have to feel that the game is more personalized to you. Because whenever you can customize anything in the game, it creates a stronger attachment with the video game. And that's with any video game. Anytime you include more customizable options, the player's going to feel a stronger bond with that game. Speaking of players, getting into some fan feedback, which is a segment I usually keep for games that I'm breaking down, we're getting into Twitter user number 1, Gilda. This person is showing off the TemTem art of the Rosemary TemTem. So as you can see, this is the style that TemTem goes for, and this is why it's kind of compared to Pokemon because of the similarities. But at the same time, TemTem has its unique characters that look different from Pokemon, so it's not too much, but it's kind of the same art style. Getting into the next Twitter user in continuity error, I've been enjoying playing TemTem and figured I'd do a quick drawing of my favorites from the game. So just showing off another TemTem in the game, and you can just tell that Spanish development studio took the time with drawing and making each TemTem, as this Twitter user took the time out to make his own drawing from the game. And when they do that, you know they're really invested. So but that means that TemTem really put a lot of thought into the creation process. Third Twitter user says, I love TemTem so much, I decided to make some TemTem cards. Then he goes on to say, this is the base for them so far. And as you can see, the TemTem cards are clear, but they have the TemTem outline on them. So it's a nice little touch and unique style of making a card. And whenever fans are having these type of creative ideas and it comes from your game, you can't help but just to have a good feeling on the future of your game. And then this last Twitter user is having a common problem problem when the game first came out because Spanish development didn't think that TemTem would be so loaded on the server base when it first came out, because it was promoted, but at the same time they didn't know that this many players was excited to hop on the early release, because they actually sent out codes to creators, but other players could get their hands on the game as well if you own the PC. So it was interesting and probably a pleasant surprise for them to see how many people were rushing to the game when it first came out, and that meant that we will have instances like these when a player can't get into the game because the servers are overloaded. They eventually fixed that problem though, so this Twitter user is most likely not having this problem anymore trying to get on the game. So yeah, in summary, TemTem is starting to look like the perfect Pokemon alternative, and that is great to have because this competition will hopefully force Game Freak, the Pokemon devs, to start implementing some fan favorite features, because right now TemTem is really listening to their community and fixing the game accordingly, as they really want to get these console ports out, but at the same time focus on the PC port that they have so it doesn't fall to the wayside of excitement. But let me know, have you played TemTem, and what are your thoughts on the game's beta / early access? Let me know down in the comment section below. In my opinion, I feel like TemTem is one of those type of games you need every once in a while to keep titles like Pokemon honest. And what I mean by that is that, let's say PlayStation was the only console you could buy and Microsoft never existed. Do you really think they would be going this hard to stay on top when the competition isn't even near the level of success? Probably not. So that's how I feel about TemTem versus Pokemon. It can only improve each individual company, and in turn fans will start to get what they want from Game Freak and already have a visual of what they want coming to life in TemTem. So yeah, that's it for the video. If you enjoyed this, make sure to let me know by hitting that like button, subscribe, and share this with your friend, neighbor, dog, or just send this to the person across the street asking Game Freak to make a separate Pokemon MMO, because without them this wouldn't be possible. And with that, I'm out.